Hello everybody and welcome back, where today we're going over my first impressions of Presentiment of Death on PSVR2. This is a scenario-based wave shooter style game, very similar to SUPERHOT I would say, as the closest comparison, where you use a bow and arrow to take out a variety of enemies and progress through 14 stages made up of 3 or 4 levels each. Now, I've played through 11 stages of the game and quite a bit of the survival mode so far, because it has been a billion degrees here in the UK, but I thought I'd best put out my thoughts to you guys to tell you how I've been finding it. Now, I believe it's out in a couple of days on the 19th of June, and before we get further into it and talk about it a bit more, only 25% you are subscribed, so please feel free to do so, and thank you to our patrons and members who are all on screen right now. With that being said, let's talk Presentiment of Death on PSVR2. As you may be seeing on screen right now, Presentiment of Death looks very much like SUPERHOT, and that is the base premise. To be honest, it's SUPERHOT, but with a bow and arrow. When your arrow is not knocked and you're not taking a shot, time will move slowly, but as soon as you draw your bow back, time will start moving fast again, meaning you have to make your shot counts and plan in advance. This is quite a cool formula on paper, and it does work out pretty well in VR. Visually, on PSVR2, the game runs unreprojected and looks very sharp, but of course it's not the most graphically demanding thing in the world, but everything here looks as it looks in the flat screen. It looks very nice. It does make use of haptics in the controllers fairly well, but I didn't really notice any adaptive trigger support here. But ultimately it's a very simple gameplay loop. You're in a certain area, you can't move like SUPERHOT, and you take on enemies that are advancing towards you and try and stop them before they get to you or they take you out. And it's also very worth mentioning there are no turning options here, so you only physically turn with your body, meaning that your reaction time is determined by that. As I said before, there are 14 stages to complete. There isn't really a story here. It says in the description of the game on the PS Store that it is a story-driven action game, but really it's more like Vendetta Forever or SUPERHOT, where you're put into a scenario and you've got to fight your way out. Each of the 14 levels, as I said, has 3 or 4 stages, and they put you in different areas in the map that you're in. And if you fail one of these, you go back to the start of those stages. So say I'm on level 1 and I get to stage 3 out of 4. If I fail then, I go back to stage 1 in level 1 or whatever level I was playing, and then I have to fight my way through again until I win all of them. The game does throw a fair few different enemy types at you as it progresses, which you then have to take out again with your bow and arrow. And this does vary up the gameplay as you progress. You'll have larger enemies, you'll have melee enemies who try and just run up to you, and if they get to you, they kill you. You have axe throwing enemies who throw in a linear straight line. You'll have archer enemies who arc arrows towards you that you have to dodge, and small drones, which I found were the hardest to kind of combat throughout my playtime so far, because they really do try and sneak up on you and they're pretty small and hard to hit. This offers a fair bit of challenge, and to be honest, I found that it actually took a while to get through some of the stages. That being said, I didn't really find there was too much leeway on how to actually approach these stages per se. Once you figure out which enemies are probably the best to take out first and then what to move on to, you're pretty much just repeating that process if you fail a stage and go back to the start. And the game doesn't have the most replay value, I would say, aside from the survival mode, which actually is pretty fun and, from remembering, seems to invert the time mechanic. So when you knock your arrow into your bow, time slows, and when you don't, it's fast. So it's the opposite of the campaign, which is a cool twist on the formula. If you're really quick, the stages in the game honestly take less than an hour to get through, I would say. I'm almost at the end and I've only got about 45 minutes in the game. I've got hung up on a couple of stages, but not too many. But ultimately it's a very simple formula and it does do it well, and that survival mode does add a bit of replayability on the end, but overall if you're looking for something to sink tens of hours into, then this isn't the game for you. Similar to Vendetta Forever in terms of that, but with a bit less depth than that game, I would say, because of the lack of the sandbox in terms of weapons that you're using. One thing that I feel works better in standalone than on PSVR2 for this game though, is the fact that you're being attacked from all angles in certain stages and game modes. For example, survival, enemies will come at you from everywhere, and when you're tethered to a console, it isn't the end of the world, but you do have to be kind of a little bit conscious about your wire and not tripping over it or making it too tangled or coiled, whereas in standalone I feel like this would work very well because you can move around freely and kind of take shots fast without worrying about being tethered to a $500 console. However, if you do have a decently sized play space, I would say it's completely fine to rotate around and take shots at enemies and not really worry about tangling your wire too bad or tripping over yourself. I did find that the bow took a second to kind of reset its position between stages. I think it's probably because it's simply teleporting you around, so the actual bow physics takes a second to kind of catch up. So that was a little bit jarring, but overall the game does feel pretty fun to play, and taking shots at enemies isn't eye track assisted like it is in Horizon Call the Mountain, which you can turn off in that game by the way, but that does add a lot more challenge to this because you're simply relying on your aim with your right and left arm instead of being assisted by any sort of measure like that. So it actually can get kind of difficult, especially with stages with a lot of enemies that you're trying to take out very quickly. Lastly, let's talk about 3D audio. I played with a mix of headphones and surround sound, and it was really cool hearing arrows whistle past when I dodged them.
That's some cool sound design when it goes past me. I'm playing on surround sound, so it like whistle past me then.
With a backing track that is composed of a lot of classical music like Beethoven and Mozart, which I did find quite a cool touch to the liminal space vibe of the game. Overall, Presentiment of Death doesn't offer that much in terms of replayability or variety, but it is a decently fun time on PSVR2, quite a middle-of-the-road VR game, but I can't say that I came away really disappointed because I knew what I was getting myself into from the get-go. It doesn't quite reach the heights of games like SUPERHOT and Vendetta Forever, and I do wish it was a bit longer, but the gameplay is fairly refined and I had a decent time. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.